Since the beginning of time, man has always wondered, what is it that makes a good video game? Is it the graphics? Is it the gameplay? Is it the story? Is it the combat? And I'm here to answer that question once and for all. And the thing that makes a good video game good is if you play that video game and then you go to bed that night and you're still thinking about that video game, and you wake up in the morning and you're still thinking about that video game, and you go shower and you're still thinking about that video game, then that's likely a very good video game. If a game plants its seed into your brain and its roots just dig into your neural networks and gets its claws into you, I consider that to have been a good game. Now, which games appeal to men typically? And men almost exclusively. You have very competitive games like CSGO or Dota 2 or League of Legends. You have MMOs like World of Warcraft and old school RuneScape. You have these games like Path of Exile that are very deep and complex. And what do all of these games have in common? The thing they all have in common is that they all have these problems that need to be solved. Whether it's climbing a rank, whether it's gearing up, whether it's clearing a raid boss, there is a problem that you need to solve. And men cannot help themselves but to solve problems. And this is so evident when you consider the way that men and women talk to one another. You see this all of the time, where a woman will approach a man and she'll say, "Man, I had a bad day. This happened to me, and Sally said this, and this dude said that." And what is the man inclined to want to do? He wants to solve her problems. He wants to say, "Well, have you considered saying this? Have you considered doing that? Maybe you should try this." And she gets so frustrated because she's not trying to solve her problems right now. She's trying to get some empathy from the guy. And men do this with each other. Maybe I'll talk to one of my friends and I'll say, "Hey, so I have this thing going on or that thing going on." And they're immediately hitting me with advice. "Well, have you tried this? Maybe you should do this." I didn't ask for no advice, dude. I'm just telling you. So men cannot help themselves but to do this. And the reason why that is because throughout history, way back in time, what did men do? They teamed up together, they grabbed some spears, they killed some mammoths, they killed some lions, and they ate and they fed women and children. That's exactly what World of Warcraft is when you get a raid team together and you group up to take down the big bad and get the loot. League of Legends, you get together with a group of men. You know, there are some exceptions like Path of Exile, but it's still centered around gearing up and progressing and feeling a sense of progress and accomplishment. This is what men are evolutionarily designed to do. And if you don't believe in evolution, they're designed to do this evidently. We can see this both in history and we can see this in modern day. And so, herein lies the predicament. Men are natural problem solvers. But when you solve problems in a video game, you're solving a problem that has no real application to your real life. Why do men solve problems in real life? Why do men go on the hunt in real life? Why do men go to war in real life? Typically, it's to acquire resources, to give those resources to themselves, their women, their children, or to defend against people who are trying to take their resources and harm their women and children. And so the problem with these video games, right? And don't get me wrong, I love video games. My channel is primarily about video games, amongst other things, but there's a lot of video game topics. So I'm going to get into that later on in this video, why video games aren't necessarily bad. But what they do is that they create a situation where you're solving problems that aren't real problems. And in real life, when you solve these real problems, you get real rewards. Access to women, food, things like that. And so that's also why you see this sort of correlation between video games and pornography. These things are often brought up together. You play video games and then you go watch porn. You play video games and you watch porn. Because this is naturally what men do. They solve problems and then they go on to go get laid. They solve problems, and they go together. But the problem with both video games and pornography is video games don't solve real problems, Pornography isn't really actually getting laid. It's a simulation, and it's an effective simulation. It's a fun simulation, but it's a simulation nonetheless. Another way you can kind of exhibit this sort of behavior, because a lot of boomers like to run around saying, "Oh, you young kids, you in your video games. I can't believe you're playing your video games." You know what they do? That's the equivalent. Watch sports ball. They sit down, it's a Sunday afternoon. They're sitting down, drinking a beer, and they're watching whatever football or whatever sports ball they're watching. It's the same idea. They get absorbed in this. They're not really solving problems, but they live vicariously through the athlete. And this game, the sport, is also in and of itself a manufacture of tension, a manufacture of creating problems. And men live vicariously through this without they themselves being someone who is actually solving the problems. So it's so inherent in men. And I've noticed something rather interesting in myself personally. And it's a bizarre phenomena. And I don't know how many of you could relate to this. Some of you might. Where whenever I take a break from going to the gym, for whatever reason, stress, whatever, right? No time, doesn't matter. I find my desire to play video games increases, but whenever I'm going to the gym or whenever I'm really busy with work, my desire to play video games diminishes so long as I'm making progress in the gym and so long as I'm making progress at work. If line go up, if number go up, then that part of me gets fulfilled. That desire for progress, that desire for accomplishment, that desire for going on the hunt gets quelled. And then it's not even like I have to pull myself away from video games. I could barely get myself to sit down to play them. They're not as interesting to me when line goes up anyway, because a video game simulates line goes up, number goes up. And so it really does pry on that tendency. It really does pry on that instinct. And so, does that mean video games are bad? No, absolutely not. And the clinical definition of addiction is something that gets in the way of your real life. I think escapism is healthy. If you do want to play video games after a long day of work and this helps you escape so you can be ready to take on the day the next day, then that's great. Video games only become a problem when they do act exclusively as a substitute for actual real life accomplishments. And oftentimes they're used as a cope in that way as well. When men feel like they're not accomplishing in their lives, or when they took an L recently, how do they tend to comfort themselves? By going to the video games. That's the problematic behavior. It's because that's how you get addicted to drugs as well. And that's what's sad. The sad part is drug addictions occur when people try to fill a void in their life. Maybe they take opiates because it feels like a warm hug because they were missing affection. It's sad, but this is how addictions occur. My own personal story, I have a story not with a heroin addiction or something, but with coffee, where, I'm somewhat of a workaholic at times and I want to keep working and working. So then my coffee intake increases day by day by day, and eventually I burn out. So in much in the same way, this is kind of a situation that men can get in with video games. So I kind of want to wrap this up by saying that me personally as a man, I found in my own life that not women, not traveling, not vacations, nothing makes me as happy and as joyful besides, spirituality. That's kind of on another level, but nothing in, the material realm makes me as happy as accomplishing things. And so for that reason, men solve problems. Video games solve men.